Ladies and gentlemen, you think a steady job, a fixed income, or keeping your dreams small is safety. It's not. It feels safe because it's predictable. You know when the paycheck is coming. You know what your day looks like. You know how to keep your head down, follow the rules, and avoid rocking the boat. And for a while, that feels good. It feels responsible. But here's the problem. While you're clinging to what's familiar, the world around you is changing faster than you realize. The ground under your feet is shifting, and the safety you think you have is an illusion. Inflation is quietly stealing your purchasing power month after month. Even while your income stays the same, technology is replacing entire industries, and job titles that exist today might not exist in 5 years. A single corporate restructuring, a new piece of software, or a shift in market demand can erase what you thought was your secure position. And when that happens, you realize too late that safety was never safety. It was stagnation. The truth is, the very thing you're using to protect yourself is what's keeping you vulnerable. Playing safe doesn't make you strong. It makes you dependent. It ties your livelihood to someone else's decisions. It leaves your future in the hands of a company, of a boss, or an industry that has no obligation to take care of you when they don't need you anymore. And the hard reality, you can't control those things. You can't control the market. You can't control your company's quarterly earnings. You can't control whether the skills you have now will be valuable tomorrow. But you control your ability to adapt. You can control your capacity to create new opportunities. And you can control how much you're willing to bet on yourself instead of waiting for someone else to guarantee your safety. People think risk is stepping out into uncertainty. But here's the twist. You're already in uncertainty. You're just pretending you're not. You're not avoiding risk by staying in your lane. You're avoiding the truth that life is risky no matter what you do. The difference is that when you choose, you have a shot at reward. When you choose to stay safe, you still get risk. But without the reward, that's the worst trade you could ever make. It's like hiding in the basement during a storm, thinking you're safe, while the water level is quietly rising and you don't even notice until you're neck deep. This illusion of safety is seductive because it lets you off the hook. It gives you an excuse to delay. You see the strength yourself. You can tell you'll start that business one day. You'll invest when things are more stable. You'll take that leap when the timing is right. But here's the catch. Stability never arrives. Timing is never perfect. The conditions you're waiting for don't exist. And by the time you realize that years have passed, opportunities have expired, and the only thing you've gained is the false comfort of thinking you avoided danger. In reality, you just avoided growth. You have to understand that your comfort zone is not a safe zone. It's a control zone. It keeps you operating at the same level, repeating the same patterns, earning the same income, thinking the same thoughts. And the longer you stay there, the more your potential atrophies. Muscles unused grow weaker. Skills untested grow dull. Dreams unattended fade into something you barely remember. And then you wake up wondering why you feel restless, why you feel like something's missing, even though did everything right. It's because safety is not a purpose. Stability is not fulfillment. You weren't created just to survive. You were created to grow, to expand, to create, to impact. When you understand that, you see the cost of playing safe for what it really is. It's not just lost income. It's not just missed opportunities. It's the slow erosion of your confidence, your creativity, and your belief in what's possible for you. Every year you spend prioritizing safety over growth, you're not just staying the same. You're falling behind. The world is moving forward, and if you're standing still, you're moving backward by default. And one day you'll realize that the price you paid for so-called safety wasn't measured in dollars, but in years of your life you can't get back, and in the version of yourself you never became. Growth lives outside your comfort zone, and that is why playing safe costs you more than you can imagine. The human tendency is to cling to the familiar because it feels secure, but familiarity is a trap disguised as stability. When you play it safe, you don't stretch yourself, and when you don't stretch yourself, you rob yourself of the very experiences that create transformation. It's easy to stay in the lane you already know, doing what you've always done, surrounded by the same people, the same routines, and the same environment. It feels like you're in control because nothing is changing, but in reality, you're just preserving the status quo, and the status quo never produces growth. The comfort zone is a prison without visible bars. You can walk out at any time, but most people never do because the walls feel warm, the floor feels steady, and the air feels familiar. Yet outside those walls is the only place where you can discover what you're really capable of. Think about your own life. Every meaningful skill you've ever developed required you to be uncomfortable first. The first time you spoke in public, your voice might have shaken. The first time you tried to sell something, you probably fumbled through your words. The first time you learned a new skill, you had to stumble through mistakes and look awkward in front of the people. That discomfort wasn't a sign you were failing. It was proof you were growing. But when you play safe, you avoid those situations. You avoid the awkwardness. They see the uncertainty, the risk of embarrassment. And in doing so, you also avoid the breakthroughs. You trade progress for temporary ease. Forgetting that discomfort is the tuition you pay for transformation. Playing safe costs you opportunities you never even see because they exist in places you've never ventured. Opportunities don't go on the door of your comfort zone. They live on the edges of your experience. They see the strength of it in rooms where you feel unqualified, in conversations where you don't know what to say, in arenas where you're not sure you belong yet. You find them only when you're willing to risk looking inexperienced. When you're willing to ask questions that reveal you know everything, when you're willing to say yes to something you don't feel ready for. Staying safe means you never step into those rooms, and as a result, you never access the people, ideas, and possibilities that could have reshaped your entire future. It's not just that comfort keeps you from gaining new skills. It also erodes the skills you already have. Growth is like a muscle that strengthens with use and weakens with neglect. If you're not challenging yourself, you're not just staying where you are, you're getting weaker without even realizing it. Playing safe means you're rehearsing mediocre after day at becoming an expert at staying the same. The longer you do it, the harder it becomes to break out because you've trained yourself to avoid challenge. And the avoidance becomes a habit. The cost of playing so shows up in your mindset. When you constantly choose what's easy, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle what's hard. You create a mental ceiling for yourself, convincing yourself that certain achievements are for other people or out of reach. In reality, they're only out of reach because you've stopped reaching. The more you avoid discomfort, the more you start to fear it. And fear has a way of shrinking your vision until you're aiming for a life that's far smaller, the one you're capable of living. This is why people often feel a lingering dissatisfaction, even when they've achieved what they set out to do. You can check all the boxes, steady paycheck, decent house, predictable schedule, and still feel like something is missing. They see the strength of that something is growth. Humans are wired for progress. We need to see ourselves getting better, stronger, more capable. Without that sense of advancement, even comfort starts to feel empty. The playing safe tricks you into thinking you protect yourself from failure, but what you're actually protecting yourself from is the very thing that gives life meaning, the challenge of becoming more. You can't grow by doing what you've always done. Growth requires a gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap is uncomfortable by definition. It's the space where you have to figure things out, where you make mistakes, where you feel vulnerable and exposed. But it's also the space where you discover your resilience, where you surprise yourself with what you can handle, where you uncover abilities you didn't know you had. The comfort zone shields you from that space, and in shielding you, it also suffocates you. Every time you choose safety over growth, you're telling yourself that the life you have now is the best it's ever going to get, and you're closing the door on the life you could have had. Every breakthrough you want, more money, more freedom, more impact, sits on the other side of risk, and that is a truth people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Risk is not a punishment. It's not a trap. It's the toll you pay to cross the bridge from where you are to you want to be. It's the tuition for greatness. And like any tuition, it costs you something up front, but it gives you a return that far outweighs what you invested. The reason so many never experience that return is they see the price and walk away without ever realizing they are walking away from the prize as well. They want the reward without the requirement, the victory without the vulnerability, the success without the stretch. Life doesn't work that way. Everything worth having demands a down payment of courage. When you avoid risk, you are not avoiding cost. You are just trading a short-term, visible cost for a long-term, invisible one. You pay in missed opportunities, in wasted years, in the slow decay of your potential. You pay every time you watch someone else live the life you want, or you talk about trying because it's not the right time, or what if it doesn't work? The truth is nothing is guaranteed. And that's exactly why risk has value. The fact that you could lose makes the win meaningful. The fact that you could fail makes the success fulfilling. Without that element of uncertainty, they see the streamers would feel hollow because they wouldn't require you to grow into someone who could earn them. Think about the most significant transformations in history, in business, in personal life. They all started with someone stepping into the unknown. An entrepreneur risking their savings to launch a product no one had seen before. A leader risking their reputation to speak an unpopular truth. A pioneer risking comfort and safety to explore a new frontier. None of those breakthroughs came from someone playing it safe, keeping their head down, and sticking to the script. They came from someone who understood that risk was not the enemy. Risk is neutral. It's simply the possibility of a different outcome. Fear is what makes you assume that outcome will be negative. And fear is what convinces you to stay put when everything you want is waiting beyond your current reach. The reason risk is such an effective teacher is because it forces you to make decisions without perfect information. You can't hide an analysis forever. You can't wait for certainty. When you take a risk, you commit before all the details are worked out, and that commitment compels you to grow. You learn on the fly. You adapt under pressure. You become resourceful in ways you didn't know you could be. That's why people who take calculated risks often seem lucky. Their luck is just the byproduct of being in motion, adjusting as they go. and creating opportunities that cautious people never even encounter. Of course, there's a difference between reckless risk and strategic risk. Reckless risk ignores preparation, ignores patterns, ignores wisdom. Strategic risk acknowledges the unknown but prepares for it, steps into it with intention, and treats it as an investment rather than a gamble. The most successful people are not the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who have learned to feel fear and move forward anyway, because they understand the bigger danger is staying in place. They calculate the cost of action, yes, but they also calculate the cost of inaction, and they recognize that the latter is almost always higher. Risk also has a compounding effect. The more you take it, the better you get it at managing it. Your tolerance increases. Your discernment sharpens. You stop flinching at uncertainty and start seeing it as the natural environment of growth. Opportunities that once felt intimidating begin to feel like the next logical step. And because you're willing to step into situations as a void, you gain access to rewards others never touch. This is why risk is not just a one-time payment, it's a habit. Every time you invest courage, you expand your capacity for the next leap. People often say they're waiting until they're ready before they take a chance, but readiness is a side effect of risk, not a prerequisite for it. You don't get ready and then act. They see the strength of you act, and in acting, you become ready. If you wait until you feel completely prepared, you'll wait forever. Risk forces readiness. It demands a version of you that doesn't exist yet, and the moment you step forward, you begin to become the version. That's why risk is not just the price of greatness, it's the process of greatness. It doesn't just lead to the result you want. They shapes you into the person who can handle that result once it arrives. Look at the marketplace and you'll see a pattern that repeats over and over again. It does not reward caution, it rewards courage. The highest returns, the most influential positions, the biggest opportunities, they all flow toward those who are willing to step out before it feels comfortable, before it feels certain, it feels guaranteed. Playing it safe might protect you from small losses, but it will also protect you from big wins. The people who rise to the top in any industry understand that speed and decisiveness matter more than perfect timing, and bold matters more than flawless plans. They act on opportunities while others are still gathering information. They launch ideas while others are still debating. They start conversations while others are still rehearsing what to say. The market recognizes and rewards that kind of initiative because it moves things forward. When you choose caution as your default strategy, you're competing with thousands of others who are also doing the same safe thing. You're standing in the longest line for the smallest prize. The bold, on the other hand, are often standing in much shorter lines because fewer people are willing to take the steps required to get there. And that's why boldness has such a high payoff. It creates scarcity. There's less competition in the space where the risks are higher, and that scarcity increases the value of what you achieve when you succeed. It's simple economics applied to human behavior. The rarer the action, the greater the reward. Boldness sends a signal, and that signal changes how people respond to you. In business, in relationships, and leadership, those who move with confidence and clarity attract trust, attention, and resources. They see the strength in when they don't have all the answers. Their willingness to commit inspires to commit with them. Investors back them, partners join them, customers buy from them, and audiences listen to them because boldness is contagious. It makes people believe something is possible. Caution, on the other hand, broadcasts hesitation. It tells people you're not fully convinced, and if you're not convinced, why should they be? The market doesn't just respond to your product or service, it responds to your posture. One of the biggest advantages of courage over caution is that courage creates momentum. The moment you take a bold step, you open doors you didn't even know existed. You meet people you wouldn't have met. You get access to information you wouldn't have had. You see opportunities you couldn't have seen from a distance. Caution keeps you circling the same block, walking the same path, interacting with the same circle. Boldness puts you in new territory, and new territory is where growth happens. And even if a bold move doesn't deliver the results you expected, it still moves you forward because it teaches you faster than standing still ever could. The market doesn't operate on sympathy. It doesn't pay you for trying. They see the strength of it. It pays you for producing results, and results come from action. When you hesitate, someone else acts. While you're perfecting your plan, someone else is already testing theirs. While you're thinking about starting, someone else is already building. By the time you're ready, they've already established themselves, built a reputation, and taken the position you were eyeing. The world moves too quickly for caution to keep up. Courage allows you to enter the game before all the conditions are perfect and adjust as you go, and that adaptability is often more valuable than the original plan. Boldness also changes how you see yourself. Every time you take a courageous step, you prove to yourself that you can handle uncertainty. That proof builds confidence, and confidence changes the way you operate in every area of life. It makes you more decisive, more persuasive, more resilient. It allows you to make bigger plays because you've already built a track record with yourself that says, I follow through, I adapt, I figure it out. Caution, on the other hand, erodes confidence over time because it keeps you from testing and expanding your limits. When you avoid challenges, you rob yourself of the experiences that would have shown you how capable you really are. In every industry, They see the strength of the lead ones who are willing to risk being wrong in order to have the chance to be right in a big way. They know that failure is temporary, but missed opportunities can be permanent. They understand that a calculated leap forward will put them in positions where others hesitate to tread, and those positions often become the launching pads for the next level of success. The market has a short memory for mistakes, but a long memory for innovation, and innovation is born from bold moves. Playing it safe rarely creates anything worth remembering. When you look back on your life, it won't be the risks you took that haunt you. It will be the chances you never took. Playing safe feels smart in the moment because it avoids short-term discomfort. But what it really does is plant the seeds of long-term regret. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't show up right away. It waits. It sits quiet in the background while you convince yourself you made the sensible choice. And then years later, it shows up full force when you see what could have been. You hear about someone who took the leap you didn't take, and now they're living the life you once imagined. You stumble on an idea you had years ago, only to find someone else turned it into a thriving business while you were still telling yourself the timing wasn't right. That's when the weight of regret hits, because you can't go back and make that decision again. The human mind is wired to protect you from danger, and that's useful when there's real danger. But most of the time, the risks you avoid aren't life-threatening. They're ego-threatening. Right. You don't launch the project because you might fail in public. You don't start the conversation because you might get rejected. You don't try the new skill because you might look foolish. And in the moment, protecting yourself from those feelings feels like a win. You get to keep your pride intact. You get to avoid embarrassment. You get to stay in familiar territory. But what you're really doing is making a trade. You're trading temporary comfort for permanent wonder at what might have happened if you had acted. Failure fades. The sting of a failed attempt, the awkwardness of a misstep, the embarrassment of a public flop, all of that eventually becomes a story you tell, often with a laugh. But the feeling of, I could have, but I didn't, lingers. It doesn't fade because there's no resolution. Failure gives you closure because at least you know what happened. Regret offers no closure. It's an unfinished chapter that never written, and it plays over in your mind every time you think about what might have been possible. The irony is that most people overestimate the pain of failure and underestimate the pain of regret. They imagine that failing will be unbearable, but in reality, failure is just feedback. It gives you lessons. It builds resilience. It sharpens your skills. Regret gives you nothing. It teaches you nothing because there's nothing to analyze. You never made the move, so you have data, no experience, no progress, just the knowledge that you stayed still when you could have moved. Playing safe also creates a false sense of keeping what you have. But the truth is, time is slipping by no matter what. You don't get to freeze the clock just because you're not taking risks. Every year you wait is a year you can't get back, and the opportunities of that moment will never appear in exactly the same way again. The market changes. People change, your own energy and circumstances change. The version of that's here now won't be here forever, and neither will the window of opportunity you're looking at today. When you choose safety over action, that you're also shaping your identity. You're telling yourself, I'm the kind of person who waits. I'm the kind of person who avoids. That identity becomes reinforced with every mischance, and over time, it gets harder and harder to see yourself as someone who can act boldly. The habit of hesitation becomes a part of you, and breaking it requires more effort than it would have taken to act in the first place. And the longer you carry that habit, the heavier the regret will feel, because you'll know deep down that it was self-imposed. Regret doesn't just live in your mind. It shows up in your emotions, your conversations, and your outlook on life. It makes you cynical because it's easier to downplay what you missed than to face the truth of why you missed it. You start telling yourself that the opportunity wasn't that great anyway. They see the strength of or that the people who succeeded just got lucky, or that the timing would never have worked out. Those stories might make you feel better temporarily, but they can't erase the quiet, persistent awareness that you settled for less than you could have had. And that's the cost of playing safe that no one talks about, the slow, dull ache of knowing you traded possibility for predictability. And in doing so, you lost both. Every bold move you make has a compounding effect, much like interest in a bank account. At first, the progress seems small, almost invisible. You make a decision, you take a step, you invest time or money or effort, and it feels like nothing has really changed. But each action is a seed, and seeds don't sprout overnight. They grow quietly under the surface until one day you look back and realize you've built something far bigger than you imagined when you started. Playing small robs you of that compounding effect because there's nothing to build on. If you never make the first move, you never create the momentum that next move easier. Momentum is a powerful force. The first step you take is almost always the hardest because it requires breaking inertia. You have to push against the weight of hesitation, the pull of comfort, and the fear of the unknown. But once you're in motion, those forces lose their grip. You begin to see small wins, a conversation that leads to a new connection, a skill that gets sharper with practice, an idea that attracts attention. Those wins might be small, but they stack. Each one opens the door to the next, and over time, the accumulation becomes impossible to ignore. The bold action of compounds in confidence. The more you act, the more you prove to yourself that you can act. Every time you step into something uncertain and survive or even thrive, you rewrite the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. That new story becomes fuel for even bolder moves, and the cycle continues. The confidence built this way isn't theoretical, it's earned. It's grounded in experience and the knowledge that you've been tested and found resourceful. Play denies you that earned confidence. They see the strength of leaving you dependent on certainty before you act, which means you'll act less and less as time goes on. The compounding effect shows up in your relationships as well. Bold action puts you in rooms you wouldn't have entered otherwise. They see the strength of it connects you with people you wouldn't have met, and those people often become the source of your next opportunity, idea, or breakthrough. One introduction can change the trajectory of your business or career, but you only get those introductions by being visible, by showing up, by taking the step that others hesitate to take. Those relationships in turn lead to more relationships, and your network grows exponentially. Playing small keeps your circle limited, and a limited circle means limited possibilities. Skill is another area where compounding works in your favor. Every time you try something new, you either succeed or you learn, and both outcomes make you better. Over months and years, the skills you build through repeated action give you an edge that's impossible to replicate by theory alone. You can't think your way into mastery, you have to do. And the more you do, the faster you accelerate, because each skill supports the next one. What once took you days now takes you hours. Once felt impossible now feels routine. That kind of growth only happens when you're willing to act repeatedly, even before you feel ready. Financially, bold action often produces the kind of exponential returns that safe play never touches. The first sale, the first investment, the first big contract, these are often the result of a single courageous move. And once you've made one, the next becomes easier because you now have proof it's possible. Each win increases your capacity to make the next bigger, more profitable move. The effect builds on itself, and the gap between where you are and where you started becomes so wide that people assume you got there in one giant leap, not realizing it was dozens of small. The bold steps compounded over time. There's also a psychological compounding that happens when you act boldly. You start to view challenges differently. Instead of seeing them as threats, you see them as opportunities to stretch your capabilities. That mindset shift changes how you approach everything. You stop waiting for permission or perfect timing because you understand that the sooner you start, the sooner the compounding can begin. The person who starts now, even imperfectly, will always outpace the person who waits for ideal conditions. The danger of playing safe is that it compounds in the opposite direction. Inaction builds inertia. Hesitation reinforces fear. Every time you avoid a bold move, you strengthen the habit of avoidance, and that habit compounds into a life of missed chances. Just as bold action builds momentum upward, the small acts of avoidance create momentum downward. The choice is always there, to stack courage upon courage or to stack hesitation upon hesitation, and whichever one you choose will multiply over time until it defines your reality.